It's all Mr. Lee's reward. I can't remember how long it's been. It's been so long that I can't remember. Vin heard this and was puzzled. This further proves that he is a prehistoric monster. Hearing them talk, Tran Van Bin was dumbfounded. Are they going to ignore me or what? He thought to himself, are these guests really familiar with old Vin? As for the club side, the old people were waiting. Old Howe seemed impatient and turned to ask Old Tang. Old man, do you know the schedule of these people this time? Even the master has to personally greet them. This is the first time I've seen him so serious. The old man is also very curious. I heard they are scientists from foreign institutions. As for the others, I don't know. What kind of experts are they that even I, Chow Min, have never met before? At this time, the convoy has arrived. Mr. Lee's face showed joy. Quickly invite them in. Then there was a scene of 500 taxis entering the club. Tran Van Ben got out of the car and said, Master, long time no see. I have completed your guest pickup task. The old master was even more surprised. Clearly task number 3 was just to pick up a few people, but he mobilized a whole convoy like this. The Tran family continued to boast about their achievements. I have prepared a car for each person, providing the safest and most comfortable service. At this point, young Menden interrupted the head. His hair like Sangoku's was furious, so a few hours for me to enjoy. The rear shock absorbers didn't bother to change. What else? Looking at the driver's face, he looks angry as if he ate chili. I don't know why he didn't say anything all the way. The service is too bad. He ran straight past Mr. Lee and said, Boss, I'm going in first because I'm too carsick, tired of these street thugs. Seeing his character, the old man knew right away that this must be a weird person. As for the old master, he looked at that hairstyle and it seemed a bit familiar. After a while, as if realizing something, he quickly shouted out, What happened? They look too young. They look familiar. Then the old master turned to Anthony and asked curiously, Anthony, why are you so good at restraining yourself today? Aren't you curious at all? Anthony raised his face and said, Sooner or later we will know everything. Why rush to gossip? You need to calm down. But he went straight to Mr. Lee and asked, Master, who are they really? The old master behind him was speechless. This guy is fooling me, Mr. Lee replied. You must have heard of these people. This young man is Nikola Tesla. Yes, you heard right, it's Nikola Tesla. And the person who just went in is Menden. Hearing these names, all 3 of them were shocked. What, Nikola Tesla? Menden, huh? Mr. Lee, having so many supporters in this field is really admirable. Moreover, your plan has been going on for hundreds of years now. Seeing these people are experts, the old man approached Tesla and asked, You guys have been in South America for hundreds of years, right? So what do you think about modern nanomaterials, and what have you done to maintain its ecological cycle? Seeing the old man, young Nikola joyfully pointed at him and asked, The number 1 miniature world? What do you mean, is it in our research? Then, Nicholas rallied the brothers here to listen and everyone rushed over, surpassing Mr. Lee's face, rushing into the old man's body to gossip. The 2 old masters and Anthony also didn't understand what was happening. As for Mr. Lee, he just shook his head helplessly and left. Let's meet first. After a while of presenting about the number 1 miniature world, everyone was attentively following and now they are also members of the club. This is the number 1 miniature world. Civilization has developed to the industrial age. It's really amazing. At this time, Mr. Lee suddenly turned off, so they screamed, Don't turn it off, I haven't finished watching yet. Hey there, who does the boss do this to? At this time Mr. Lee started presenting, I've said before, I will create a second world where nothing affects it. All of you sitting here will naturally participate. First of all, let me know what you have discovered over the past 100 years that can be put into this world. After saying that, Mr. Lee invited them to speak on stage. Come up here, you can freely express your opinions. At this point the hall suddenly fell silent. Mr. Lee continued to say when he saw this, "Can't you dare to speak about your research achievements accumulated over the past 100 years in 5 minutes?" At this time there was a voice from the guy Menden below that made everyone have to look down. "No way, absolutely no way. We used to just hear about the miniature world from you, but now we have witnessed such an amazing thing with our own eyes. I feel that my achievements seem a bit inappropriate, that's all." At this time, the old man was also surprised and said, "Aha, isn't it that you have connected with the nuclear fusion laboratory? That's not wrong, I'm sure everyone here knows about this project. Nuclear fusion can be considered as an artificial sun. It is the ultimate energy source of human civilization." Mr. Lee thought about it and said, "So where is it not suitable?" He continued, "I and several people have established this laboratory. Currently a high-parameter plasma operation lasting 962 seconds has been performed." Hearing that, the 3 old men were extremely surprised. It was shorter by about 31 seconds compared to the record of the best laboratory in the world. However, this achievement is not worth mentioning when compared to the miniature world. Besides, I am still researching and simplifying the miniaturization device. After all, the huge device filling the entire cave is still too practical. Hearing that, the old man also had to think to himself, "This guy is crazy." Among them, one person stood up, "If simplifying the device can be achieved, then this technology will lead the world for more than 100 years. No, it should lead for 200 years. He immediately said, "I want to participate in this project." Mr. Lee saw that and just snorted. Then Mr. Lee said, "Everyone can research together how to apply technology into the second world, such as how to create an artificial sun. What do you guys think? In the past, the world we simulated was just a limited continent, but when I saw your research results, I had a new perspective. This year we will start researching a new universe from a star." Hearing that, everyone was speechless with astonishment. Then everyone discussed the universe. That's simply a creative action, how to simulate radiation in the macro world. Can elements in the universe be exploited and replaced on Earth? At this time Amber spoke up, "There's a way already. Just in time I want to introduce to everyone about the artificial gravity system that I have created." Mr. Lee thought to himself, "I just made a request and they can solve it right away?" Then he continued speaking with his voice, "I used to watch a movie in Country B. Although it was a way to entertain during holidays, it gave me a lot of inspiration, like having centrifugal force at the core." Hearing that, Mr. Lee started to get excited. "It seems that my scientist's plan is about to succeed. Leaders from all walks of life have gathered together with the goal of unifying everyone's views in this world. I'm afraid I'm the only person in the world who can solve all problems." At this time Amber had finished presenting his idea and he turned to ask Mr. Lee, "Master, what do you think? Do you have any opinions?" Mr. Lee simply replied, "Then let's get started right away. About cost issues, everyone doesn't need to worry." Hearing that, everyone around had to exclaim, "Boss is really cool, we are so awesome." While we were still thinking, he had already decided. What kind of calendar does he have after all? Mr. Lee pretended not to care and continued asking, "So does anyone else have any opinions?" At this time Nikola Tesla raised his hand and said, "I have an opinion." Seeing this kid wearing a fake beard, Mr. Lee couldn't help but roll his eyes. When people saw that this was Tesla, they started discussing, "This person is Tesla, right? I've investigated and he owns over 1,000 patents for inventions, huh? But with such a young face I almost didn't recognize him. But I know that more than half of those inventions are left unfinished." Unexpectedly, Nikola's ears were extremely sharp. Those casual gossiping words couldn't escape Tesla. The guy turned around and said, "That's right, you're not wrong. Actually, some inventions are still in the research stage and had to stop due to financial issues. I once said something before, now I want to say it again. If I want, then I will have enough confidence to split this earth in half." Everyone hearing that was shocked. The wireless energy transmission system is next. How can it be? Nicholas is even more convinced, he said. Sports, who becomes younger? Only a few people, those who lived in that era, will find it hard to accept this. But now it's different. Today's scientists have reached the level of wireless charging for devices. Although the efficiency is not high, they are enough to prove that the level of development of today's technology is different from the past. What I want to mention is that we are not here to live on. Instead, the knowledge that we have accumulated must be applied right now. Mendel spoke up. So what do you intend to do? You're really old-fashioned. You've proven your theories how many times? I know you'll be the first to challenge me, but it won't work. At this point, he took out something like 2 magnets from his body. These 2 little friends of mine should be enough to shut everyone up. I made this interesting thing. It's a power supply device, but it's actually still in the suitcase, in the trunk outside. Everyone was surprised again. Mr. Lee thought, wireless energy transfer system? He describes it like in a movie. Is this teleportation? Then Nicholas continued, with these models, some technological techniques will also be gradually developed, such as aerospace vehicles or the world system and human exoskeletons. However, these things are implemented based on the physical laws of the Earth. When I heard about the second world, I came up with a new idea. You have created many theories for the development and creativity of Earth's civilization. Why don't we try applying it to this new world? Let's try to imagine who will be the first to master these rules, who will be at the top of the biological chain. At that time, we will create a completely different world where everyone's theories here will become real miracles. Everyone was buzzing again. Old Tang finally understood at this point, the destination of science is theology. Mr. Lee applauded at this point. Excellent. I also find your thoughts interesting, so now everyone can prepare for practice. I believe that with the basic guidance of the first world, the second world will be a completely new opportunity and also a new challenge. Trust me everyone, there is no problem that our club and longevity cannot solve, so everyone should boldly experiment. And I will be a solid support for everyone. Outside the club were 3 families, Tran, Vin and Kong, waiting outside for a while. It was only later that people started coming out. Mr. Lee started speaking up. This time everyone did a great job. Tran Van Bin ran over to eavesdrop. You're too kind, sir, we are honored to serve you. But Mr. Lee didn't care about him and coldly walked past him, leaving him stunned. Approaching Vin's place, he quickly said, Sir, I want to introduce someone to you. No problem then, please lead the way to Vin, old man. Then Mr. Lee got in the car with Vin's family. Over here, someone was hiding at the base of a tree watching them. Then he quickly darted out. While the car was moving, he blocked the car, and the car braked sharply. Immediately after, there were loving curses from inside the car. What are you doing? Then, Vin's man got out of the car and shouted, Hey you, are you blind to rush to block the car? Do you want to die? Inside the car, old man Vin was pampering his back. My old back. Mr. Lee, sitting in the car, recognized an acquaintance. Isn't this Trin Back Van? Then Mr. Lee got out of the car and said, It's okay, he's not a bad person, I think he came here to find me. He hurriedly ran to Mr. Lee. Mr. Lee, I finally found you. But before he could meet his god of fortune, he was quickly grabbed by a guard as fast as a squirrel. Then the guard subdued him to the ground. He was still talking big. Do you know who your father is? Let go of your father now. At this point, Mr. Lee stepped forward and looked at him and said, It's been a long time since we last met, hasn't it? Come on, stand up and talk. So Mr. Lee and Trin Back Van sat in the car and talked. Wow, it's been a while. I thought you had a good life, rich with long-legged girls. But looking at your current appearance doesn't seem like that. Hearing Mr. Lee say that, Trin Back Van turned his face outside without saying anything, then hesitated to rub his hands and feet and said, Well, this Mr. Lee started looking at his lifespan information again. The remaining lifespan was 47 years. Seeing this, Mr. Lee thought, clearly a scam king, but Trin Back Van started talking about his situation. Initially, I wanted to use your money to open a restaurant. As a result, I did business at a loss, so I went bankrupt. I was also cheated out of many franchise fees. Not only that, but my rapid aging has also attracted gossip from those around me, my relatives and friends. They said that I had a strange disease that made me age quickly. Gradually, people stopped contacting me anymore. Now I realize the value of time. I'm only 23 years old, and there are still many things in life that I haven't enjoyed yet, but it seems like I've aged in a short period of time. Supposedly I should accumulate experience and work hard, but who would have thought it would turn out like this now? At this point Mr. Lee started speaking. So now you finally start feeling remorse? So now you come to see me? Trin Bak Van was silent for a while, then spoke up. So this time I want to sell another 2 years. No, 3 years, meaning half of your life. Really speechless, but Mr. Lee showed a contemptuous face and said again, let's follow the price as before, what do you think? Hearing Trin Bak Van say that, Mr. Lee laughed, then said, Trin, you're really interesting, never knowing enough. He began to explain, I actually want to use this money to find a woman and get married properly. With that money I can live a peaceful, leisurely life. I will never have to bother you again. Hearing him say that, Mr. Lee spoke up again, I think you misunderstood, but now I don't need your lifespan anymore. Hearing that, he panicked and said, what, sir? Don't joke anymore. Didn't you say before, if I need to sell more, just come to see you? Mr. Lee calmly replied, it was indeed like that before. At that time, I needed a lifespan to expand the club, but now it's different. Did you see the old man outside the car? If I want to, I can now turn him into a 20-year-old boy. So do you think I need a few small years of yours? Look at my face, does it look like I care? I can see that you have many opportunities to live a peaceful life, but it's you who didn't know how to seize it. Hearing this, Trin Bak Van knelt in front of Mr. Lee. And Mr. Lee still had a cold face and looked mysterious. He pleaded, Sir, I know I was wrong, it was me who didn't try hard. But sir, the only person I can beg is you. If you don't help me, then my life will be wasted. Please, sir? Please help me one last time. And Mr. Lee lowered his voice and said, so how much time do you want to sell this time? Hearing that, he happily replied, if this is the last time, then 8 years, right? Not enough, or is it 10 years? He calculated in his head. That leaves me with 40 years to live. Still a full 40 years, that's more than enough, Mr. Lee asked again. So this is your final decision? Yes, I've decided, this time I have to get that money. Mr. Lee raised his powerful watch and said, then don't regret it. After that was the scene of Vin's limousine finally shining brightly. Mr. Lee got out of the car and sighed with relief. He approached Old Man Vin and asked, Vin, old man, are you convenient to transfer money now? Then I will have my secretary call you back. What? Money is a small matter for Vin family, he said. How much do you need? Do you need money for something? Mr. Lee turned back and said, not me but him. Trin Bak Van got out of the car, causing everyone to be surprised. Looking at him now like a 40-year-old man. Vin's old man was shocked, looking at Mr. Lee, then turned to look at him. Is that the young man? It's bothering you too much. Then the two swept QR to transfer money to each other. After reaching an agreement, looking at his departing figure, Mr. Lee spoke up, our business is all done, right? He said with a cunning face, my money is now several times more than before, all belongs to me now. Sir, you are really a good person. Mr. Lee was also speechless with him, while Vin's family turned to speak with Mr. Lee. Sir, this person must have a problem. Future is very likely to cause trouble for you. Looking at his departing figure, Mr. Lee wondered, future, huh? Does he still have a future? Vin old man continued, clearly time is the most precious thing in the world, yet he didn't know how to keep it, Mr. Lee thought, but at least deep down he enjoyed the pleasures that many others did not have. Vin, the elder, now laughed and said, Sir, you are right. The end of greed is often not good. After saying that, he looked up at Mr. Lee. Seeing Mr. Lee's stern face, he asked, "Sir, are you angry? In such a long time, I have met countless people. Some are greedy, some are afraid of death, and some sacrifice their lives for righteousness. If everyone made me angry like this, wouldn't I have died 1,000 times? Sir, the people you have met over thousands of years must be like fish in a river. Of course, you will not pay attention to these trivial matters." At this point, Mr. Lee also thought that except for this Trinback van, no one else had ever come back to him. Suddenly he was a little curious. He wondered what they were doing at the club. Mr. Lee was looking at a three-dimensional projection device simulating a floating planet. "Who else comes here besides the founder?" "It's Robert," Mr. Lee told Robert. "You really are a versatile player." He replied, "Ah, it's nothing, sir. Lucky for you, I have a habit of collecting old hardware. This is a plan discussed and calculated by the World Space Committee No. 2. All codes are written according to the plan, so there should be no errors. To reduce consumption, we temporarily abandon other planets and set up a unique environment for planets and satellites to ensure that life can be born and evolve perfectly." Hearing this, Mr. Lee exclaimed excitedly, "Now I'm starting to look forward to it. I wonder what kind of cosmology the people on this planet will develop. Maybe one day they will cross the boundary or they will come to me. The creator of this world is interesting when thinking about it." But while Mr. Lee was watching the floating planet, someone's footsteps were approaching outside. It was Bang Hao. He held a notebook in his hand and said to Mr. Lee, "Sir, the information you asked me to investigate has results." "Oh good. Let me see," Bang Hao continued. "By the way, sir, it seems like you've been free lately. Why suddenly remember them?" "Well, it's nothing, I just want to see how their lives are going." Then Bang Hao whispered to Robert in a low voice, "Why do I feel that this is not like Sir's usual style?" "Yeah, right. Has Sir met anyone or anything recently?" "I don't know about that. I haven't been with him much lately." At this point Mr. Lee spoke up again. "By the way, Bang Hao, how are these people doing? Any changes compared to before the transaction?" Bang Hao thought for a moment and replied, "Yes, sir. The most interesting person is Ta Dai Hai. After he sold 3 years of his lifespan and got a huge sum of money. Apart from money for his father's treatment and his son's education fees, there were no other big expenses seen. After verification, he is still driving a taxi." "So does his son still go to school?" Bang Hao hesitated and replied, "This is a bit special." Hearing this, Mr. Lee understood somewhat. Last year, after his father passed away, he fulfilled his duty as a son. He let his father pass away without any pain or regret. But in the end, he might be too small in this city. Then, Bang Hao told his story to Mr. Lee. Then it was Truong Tin Tin and Nam Don Don's turn. As Mr. Lee was thinking, the phone rang. Looking at the incoming call number, it was an unknown number. Mr. Lee answered the phone, and his facial expression made the other two people not understand what happened. Mr. Lee then said to the person on the phone, "So do you believe that such a thing really exists in this world? In fact, I have decided not to do small business like this anymore. Besides, I don't think I have an obligation to prove anything to you." As Mr. Lee was about to hang up, he said something that made him very interested, "Then we will meet tomorrow." It turned out that the person who called Mr. Lee was Ta Dai Hai's son. The next day, Mr. Lee went to the appointment place, but he didn't see him anywhere. Later he saw him coming. He told about his current family situation. When he peeked at his father's phone, he knew about Mr. Lee's special ability to buy and sell time. He wanted to ask, "How much is my lifespan worth?" This question surprised Mr. Lee. Mr. Lee then asked him, why did he guess that his father is just a normal taxi driver with a low salary and suddenly has such a large sum of money? He must have sold quite a few years of life. He continued, if I am not a doomed person, then my lifespan is definitely more valuable than my father's. Hearing these words, Mr. Lee saw a second Trinback van scene, but his next words made Mr. Lee even more thoughtful. How many years do I have to sell in exchange for my father's lifespan? I don't know how many years he sold and how many years he can live, but everything he does is for me. I beg you not to let me become a beast. Mr. Lee just smirked when he heard that. You are just a college graduate with a mouth still smelling of milk and not qualified to talk to me. If you want to repay him, just study hard, find a good job and earn a lot of money. Maybe I will agree to trade with you. So how long can my father live? Mr. Lee did not hesitate to say directly, well then 8 years. It can't be less than that. I thought he could live to be at least 80 years old. But what if I don't have enough money you need within 8 years? What should I do? Then I will sell you 1 year in advance, but there will be interest. Hearing that, he was overjoyed. Really? How much do I have to pay? Mr. Lee stood up and said, you have paid it already, Mr. Ta. Now I'm in a hurry, so I'll go first. Mr. Lee returned to the Truong Sin Club. Du Di Van came over and said that the latest contract of the #1 miniature world had been adjusted. Sir, there is a bottle in her hand. Inside the bottle were glowing spots. Mr. Lee turned around and said, oh, indeed, this time it's faster than before. Yes, sir, it seems that the departments are gradually becoming more efficient, Du Di Van replied. Mr. Lee then said, I didn't expect that at all. After all, in this small world, operational errors are inevitable. It seems that your decision to expand the scale was correct. I've been thinking too much before. Mr. Lee smirked and said, then the next step. I want to see how the people in my #1 world will express their sincerity to the gods. At this point, Mr. Lee activated his power, and the dazzling light wiped out the darkness in the room. It turns out that in this bottle is the age of people in the #1 miniature world, offered in that tiny bottle, containing 600 years of life. Suddenly, Mr. Lee realized there was a problem. Wait, the quantity is wrong, he expressed his concern. Then Mr. Lee turned to ask Du Di Van, are you sure all trustees have submitted? Ms. Du hurriedly replied upon hearing Mr. Lee's words, based on supervision, it is indeed so. Is there something wrong? Mr. Lee said that he had lost 1/3 of the time compared to the previous harvest. It doesn't make much sense. Ms. Du was also surprised when she heard this. What? Why didn't we notice at all? Then Mr. Lee took out his phone and replied, the lifespan of ordinary people cannot be seen, of course it cannot be recognized. In the end, who did this? Then Mr. Lee called Bang Hao. Hello Bang Hao, you quickly arrange with me and prepare to go to Base X immediately. Now always in his head, Mr. Lee couldn't help but wonder, who dares to play tricks in front of God in this #1 miniature world? The scientists' drones are flying over, and the people in this world start pointing at the sky. For them this is a god appearing here. There was a man hiding in a corner alley who looked disgusted when he saw the satellite, then he quickly ran somewhere else and stopped in front of a house and knocked on the door. A person opened the door and looked at him and said, who are you? I heard there's a good book here, there are only old books from when I was young here. Have you seen it before? He replied, we have similar childhoods. Then the person inside didn't say anything else. This must be their signal. Immediately that man opened the door outwards. You're late, come in quickly, they're talking about a sage as I speak, he's here right? He always comes early at this time. By the way, remind you, you seem a bit tense, I'm very embarrassed. Then both of them entered a room where there were many other people inside as well. Come with me, the meeting is about to start. Then, there was a voice of a person who seemed to be the leader of this group. Gentlemen, I am very happy to see you as promised. Our lost generation has been hiding under the supervision of the gods for many years, but today I can finally confirm my conclusion. The fact proves that as long as we stay away from the contracts of the angels' trustees, our growth time from childhood to adulthood will be extended during this period. There will be more time for the body to develop gradually, and that is the best time for us to absorb and learn. I affirm that this is our normal growth and development trajectory, like those hateful trustees. They are thieves who have stolen our lifespan. It's time for us to announce the truth to the world. As for the control center of the number one world, Mr. Li and the elders were discussing, they seemed very worried. Tang Lao apologized to Mr. Li. If you hadn't mentioned this, we wouldn't even know that we need to add a data statistics base immediately. This absolutely won't happen a second time. Mr. Li gently said, it's too late to mend the fence after the sheep are lost. You can notify your subordinates to handle such things, but now, I want you to immediately give me a plan to deal with the current situation, such as we can apply some punishments to teach those fools who betrayed God a lesson. Hearing about punishment, Tang Lao was shocked. Mr. Li's intention was a great flood. Nicholas spoke up, in our culture, those who betray the gods will suffer great floods, they will make sinners feel cursed. Of course, there are many similar options. Hao Lao shouted out when he heard this, I object. No way! These are what I have worked hard to create, how can they be destroyed so easily? Nicholas said again, but don't you think it would be an interesting experience if we simulated a disaster and observed their reaction? Hearing Tesla say that, Hao Lao was speechless and didn't know what to say. But this is too ungrateful, Tang Lao said again. Struggle is the only way for human civilization to develop. Therefore, direct extinction like this is really a bit cruel. After all, they are all experimental results created by us. Hearing Tang Lao say that, Hao Lao was very satisfied. He spoke loudly, finally, the chief engineer has spoken. Then he turned to whisper to Tang Lao, you speak well, I will help you next week. Tesla smiled and said, Little Hao, don't get too excited. We can change to another plan that is not so drastic. Just reprimand them a little bit. Hearing Tesla say that, Hao Lao also asked, so what kind of example and what consequences? Although different methods are applied, generally speaking, the result is destruction like a great flood. Hearing Tesla say that, Hao Lao was stunned for 5 seconds, looking at Tesla's pictures on Facebook. So that's possible, it's just extinction, I'm also relieved. Then, feeling something was wrong, he shouted across the room, are you teasing me? Isn't that clearly death? The dirty old man with a childish face just looked at him and knew he wasn't a decent person. Indeed a traitor, Mr. Li is helpless with these old men. Later, he had to shout loudly to end the argument, silence all of you, your views are not wrong. But now the second world is still in the preparation stage, and there are problems with the first world, so we have to be cautious in everything. But we also need to discipline the people in the number one miniature world to let them learn a lesson and not dare to commit a second time. The purpose is to let these ant-like people see how small their world is and also let them know that their world really has a God. I have decided on this matter, intimidation is necessary. I have to personally make them suffer unnamed fears. Switching to the number one miniature world, there is also an organization here declaring that they will fight against the gods, a red-haired man was preaching. Angels, whatever they are liars who deceive the stupid gods. That stupid God is also a hypocrite, the promises of protection and good weather that God has promised are a joke. Our world does not exist in the first place, those things do not exist either, pain or death. Everyone looks at yourselves, we are not here because of God, we are the selection of nature and also a free soul created by nature, not God or anything. We have to offer our precious lives, what do we get in return? Dependence on an imprisoned soul? Come on everyone follow me, we will fight against those who consider themselves gods, take back our own time and regain our own destiny. Hearing him say that, everyone below also shouted in unison, come on brothers, let's follow the wise man. Then they all shouted out, long live the wise man. At this moment, the wise man looked up at the sky and discovered something, it was Mr. Li's drone. A person below pointed and shouted, "Everyone look quickly, it's the minion of that damn god." Then he took out a water gun intending to shoot it down but was stopped by the leader who said, "Those big monsters are not made of flesh and bones, we can't take them down now. But our enemies are made of flesh and bones, we can't kill that flying thing. Then kill God's trustees." In the laboratory of Miniature World Number 1, Mr. Lee decided to punish those traitors himself. Mr. Lee put on a Gauss superhero transformation suit. Mr. Lee's gestures and actions in the real world will be reflected in the miniature world. Robert instructed Mr. Lee, "Sir, please keep this posture and don't move around randomly. I need a few minutes to locate positions on your body. You just do what you should do. It's just that I feel with my current appearance there's no sense of threat." Robert replied again, "At first I thought about making you a combat suit like a superhero or Robert, but full-body rubber not only affects movement but also smells extremely unpleasant. So I thought of this plan using a method similar to real people for you to disguise. Thousands of devices inside will record your movements in real time, while reflecting high-resolution images to change your appearance. Therefore, sir, your skin will be automatically adjusted." "Oh, then let's get started." In the number 1 miniature world, there is a man trying to run. He looks very scared, panicked and tired. He is Mr. Lee's trustee. He says, "Crazy, everyone is crazy." Then, there are sounds of people chasing him there. "There, look at the stupid god Taisai there, catch him quickly." He heard that and turned around to look, panting heavily and said, "Crazy, you are all crazy. The gods have given you life, bless this place. There are no natural disasters. The gods give this place favorable rain and wind, but you have violated the oath. So the gods will not forgive you." As he spoke and ran into an alley, he encountered a person who had blocked his way there. He was shot in the head very hard by him, causing him to fall to the ground without reacting in time. Those guys said to each other, "Let me smash his dog's head." The person on the right said, "No, Antiphon is preaching and wants to take another step to control the world. He needs this guy's life to remove people's faith in the gods." Then they lead the trustee back to meet the leader here. The leader was still talking endlessly, "Follow me, overthrow the throne of that stupid god. I am your god." Then he turned around and looked at his subordinates and continued, "Those trustees have done dirty work for that god, rotten, they eat our flesh and drink our blood. Today we will send this signal to that stupid god, from now on this world is completely free." Then he pointed a knife at the trustee's neck. At this time there was thunder in the sky, causing people there to panic. Then someone also exclaimed in fear, "Quickly look at it, the sea surface." Hearing that the leader also turned around to look, he began to fear the sea. There was something out at sea. It was a tsunami wave 10 m high swallowing up the whole city, houses were collapsing, many people were swept away by the water. Seeing that, the leader ran away on 3 legs and 4 legs regardless of his subordinates begging for help. At this time his subordinates finally opened their eyes, but it was too late. Remember to choose the right civilization in your next life. At this time, the leader had run to the highest place in the city. He still couldn't believe this could happen. At this time a ship appeared in the sky. It was a ship in the Bible that survived the Great Flood along with a 3-headed 6-armed monster, Mr. Lee. Then, there was Antiphon, the redhead. He took slow steps, looking out to the sea. He was very curious, his eyes wide open, his mouth agape. The place where the monster that Mr. Lee was transforming into was loud. It seemed like Mr. Lee had been flying earlier, so now he had fallen into the deep sea. The large monster, Mr. Lee, landed and caused the water to splash up. Then, Mr. Lee showed his handsome smile, that is, in Mr. Lee's real world he has a handsome smile. But in this miniature world, with such a figure, it looks a bit large and vague when viewed from afar, not a smile but red glowing eyes. It's the cool monster that Robert mentioned, Antiphon. Seeing that figure made him scared and fall down. crawl to a corner, screaming non-stop, so scared that his eyes were red and sweaty. That is a monster. Then, thanks to his screams, others also found the young man, and he quickly regained his weak spirit and fear of ghosts. The others saw Antiphon and said, "The great gentleman is too good already, you are still safe and sound. I thought you had flown away." The young man heard this and said, "Look at his stupid face," as if he was confused. "Are they still alive? You guys are still alive. It's too good already, Mr. High. Our church only has us left, and we have also lost contact with the base in the north." Then heard him say that. Antiphon bent down and said, "Most of the cities and villages along the coast seem to have been submerged by tsunamis already, sir. Those places are all our important bases, so we have lost, right? Such heavy losses are unacceptable. I should have become a new god and enjoyed it instead of becoming like this." Then there was also a man who spoke up, and this man was also this young man's father. Then he said to Sir, "We still firmly believe that you are the chosen one. Some of us doubt you, saying that you have led the crowd to refuse action and sacrifice longevity, which angered God." Antiphon heard him say loudly, "What nonsense are you talking about? What do you know? The legend about Mr. Lee God or some other angel is just a tool made up by ancient people and royalty and customers to deceive people. You must have solid doctrine and not be poisoned by those bad guys or be led by those rumors." Hearing Antiphon say that, he also said, "Yes, yes," then looked towards the monster Mr. Lee. Then he said, "My son has now been considered as a sacrifice to offer his life to God." Then Antiphon heard it and said, "What?" Then he said, "Do you know when the flood came he hoped you could help him, but you refused to run away, leaving my son watching someone he trusted abandon him and run away? That boy used to be one of your most loyal followers, so why did you do that? And that boy is my son." Getting up laughing, "It's funny. I'm thinking if it's really like what you said, Mr. Lee God doesn't exist, then just now could you have saved him?" Hearing him say that, Antiphon started to grind his teeth in anger and said, Do you also want to go against the doctrine? Like I just said, I believe you are the chosen one, you are the only existence that can liberate the people in the current situation." After he finished speaking, he pulled out a knife, slashed at the person on his left, then continued to the person on his right. Both of them fell down within a few seconds. Surprised by this, Antiphon started to get scared and said, You, what do you want, hung? To be chosen as a new god means to be a sacrifice, right? So I will offer myself to the ancient god and appease the wrath of God. It's also to liberate the people. Without people like you existing, such things wouldn't happen anymore, right, great gentleman?" Hearing him say that, Antiphon was scared and opened his eyes wide, his mouth agape. Meanwhile in Mr. Lee's world, Hao was checking data information about the miniature world. The number 1 sound came out. "What is this at Mr. Lee's place? Is it a sensor or a camera light bulb? Never mind. Mr. Lee is still enjoying a realistic virtual reality game in the number 1 world." Then Robert spoke up and said, "Sir, according to the data, millions of people have already died due to the big flood." The old Marquis heard this and was shocked. "Oh my children. Sir, we can't continue like this. If we keep going like this, all our little treasures will die. 2 years of hard work and dedication are gone." Hearing Marquis Chow Men say that, he also replied, "It's not guaranteed yet. If this world doesn't obey me 100%, then it doesn't need to exist. After all, they are just tools for me to collect time." Compared to what was just said, have you located the mastermind of this riot yet? I'm running out of patience. Hearing Mr. Lee say that, they didn't dare to argue back. The old Marquis quickly urged Robert to search quickly before people there disappeared every second, every minute. "Hurry up, Carrot Head. Number 6, sir, is about to destroy world number 1. You know, I'm typing commands here, don't hit my chair. Sir, please wait a moment. Okay, I got it. I've sent you the coordinates. It's marked at the bottom left corner of the display screen. Oh, by the way, it seems like the distance between the two people is very close. In reality, they are very close to each other. So, Mr. Lee bent down and looked at it, probably feeling cold with the old man holding a knife. Antophon now, instead of paying attention to the old man, raised his head and opened his eyes wide, looking at the large monster with its slimy hard body, glowing eyes and tentacles behind it. The old man who wanted to kill Antophon also turned around in fear, looked at him and said, "God, Mr. Lee, God has really come." Antophon, the young man, saw Mr. Lee God approaching. He began to sweat profusely. His body trembled uncontrollably as he said, "Absolutely not, not God, definitely not." Then, the monster Mr. Lee, upon learning who was behind this, quickly took a deep breath and exhaled forcefully. "Ah," he shouted at the two others, causing their ears to ring as if they were being deafened by the sound. They both covered their ears and screamed. In the miniature world number 1, they were cool and powerful. But in reality, Robert and the old butler didn't understand what was going on. They didn't dare to laugh for fear of having their wages cut by Mr. Lee. Then, the old butler whispered to Robert, "He has a personality like a real monster." Robert continued to mutter while Mr. Lee complained about them being too small. "I can't see them clearly. Damn it, there's also this fog that keeps rising." Mr. Lee waved his hand as he spoke because there was so much fog that he couldn't see the people in the miniature world clearly due to their small size. This was the effect of waving his hand to disperse the fog. By the way, he accidentally hit the building where the two others were staying with a wet slap. It was just an accident, but the old man, their father, fell down with the debris of the building. He said, "Mr. Lee God, please forgive me." Mr. Lee asked in confusion as the dust and smoke cleared. It seemed that Robert had hacked and removed the fog for Mr. Lee. The city was flooded everywhere, submerging many small buildings. Antophon, seeing Mr. Lee's performance, was speechless. He sat on the ground and whispered to himself, just a wave of his hand. "Is this a god?" The young man standing before God Mr. Lee must have regretted it by now. Mr. Lee put his hand on his hip and looked at Antophon saying, "Oh, it seems you're quite lucky. I'm still wondering if I accidentally slapped you to death." Antophon opened his eyes wide upon hearing this and couldn't say anything other than being speechless at what monster Mr. Lee had said. Antophon didn't understand because this language was from another country. The young man felt like he was listening to a foreigner speak in front of him. Then Mr. Lee stroked his chin and murmured to himself, "By the way, life in miniature world number 1 can't understand the language of the world, can it? So I'm talking to myself." As for Antophon, after hearing Mr. Lee's incomprehensible language, he said, "God, is God communicating with me? Is this God's language?" Then Antophon stood up and said, Do you want to kill me? But even if I die, I won't change my mind." He then shouted, "You have no right to interfere with our time, life or lifespan. Even in front of a god I want to fight against this fate. Now open your eyes and look at this world. Mr. Lee God, have you brought enough disaster to this world? Why are there orders in this world? Time is what's needed here." Listening to Antophon's words made him realize that although he didn't understand what he was saying, he understood his thoughts. But in your world where you live and exist here, consciousness or thoughts of resistance against God are absolutely not allowed. I have absolute control and domination over this entire world, and you are just lucky enough to participate in this world. After Mr. Lee finished speaking, he gave Antophon a painful experience. Antophon was beaten by Mr. Lee to the point of flying out and collapsing in a pool of blood. Then, he said, "I feel like all my internal organs have shattered." Then, Mr. Lee jumped up, causing water droplets to spray into the sky. Antophon looked up at Mr. Lee and said, "God is still God." It seems like Antophon is not doing well, right? I wonder if he's crying or something. Mr. Lee seemed to want to transform and said, "Those who dare to offend the Creator will have to bear the wrath of God." The monster Mr. Lee turned his tusks into wings and flew high. Ever since Mr. Lee brought about the apocalypse and created a terrifying tsunami, destroying countless small lives, it has been going on for several months. Although many months have passed in the miniature world, in Mr. Lee's real world, it only took a few hours. A few people managed to escape from the flood. They went to higher ground to avoid the flood. Compared to their previous prosperous, wealthy, peaceful, and happy life, now it's just a matter of survival, which is difficult. As for the culprit who caused all this, Andaphon, Mr. Lee let him survive to see the world he created, the consequences of opposing God. Mr. Lee, calling for people to stop offering their lifespan to Mr. Lee. Now everywhere is water, and the screams of small humans can be heard. Mr. Lee still kept his wings flying in the sky, looking at the land of the miniature world. As for Andaphon, he probably hasn't shaved in several months. He shouted at Mr. Lee, Mr. Lee God, why don't you kill me?" He was scared and didn't understand why Mr. Lee didn't kill him. Then the scene shifted to a forest where there was a loud noise booming. There was also a group of people who were lucky enough to escape from the flood. They needed to carry axes and weapons. They also heard the sound coming from above them. Then there was a man with glasses looking up at the sky and talking. "What's going on? Another earthquake?" Then there was a man who had just run from somewhere saying that he had found him. "We've found that bastard again. He appeared on the beach again." "I found him. The culprit who caused all this. We must catch him and deal with him." Then there was a fat man with a bandaged head who said fearfully, "Hey, can we just forget about it? That huge monster flying in the sky is really scary. And just now it didn't seem like an earthquake," he said. The man with glasses approached him and said, "What's the matter? Sir, are you scared?" "No, after all, we are lucky to have survived, right? Think about it. The screams of your wife and children before they died, they always called your name, didn't they? Not only that, but your next-door neighbor also called your name. So, I ask you, who caused all this? Who turned a peaceful and happy place of hundreds of years into this? It's because of that virtuous man, that foolish and delusional virtuous man who turned his mouth into a loudspeaker, preaching everywhere and teaching how to resist God and the spirits, killing those who work for God. This angered Mr. Lee God and released the demons from hell to punish us. Now all his guards are buried at sea. This is the perfect time for our revenge." Then a bald man said, "I agree. That guy used to be very rich by advertising to the world, and he hasn't starved to death yet. He must have a lot of food in his tent." "That's right. Now let's go find him and settle the score." Then they started moving. Meanwhile, at sea, the waves were raging. Could it be that the water level was rising, wanting to flood that island? Look now, aren't the waves more violent than before? Maybe one day this place will also be submerged by the sea. No matter what, even if it means death, I will kill that virtuous bastard first, they said in silence. "Is Andaphon over there?" Then they quickly hid to spy on what Andaphon was doing. Andaphon was kneeling towards the sea, not knowing what he was planning to do. Then he took a deep breath and screamed loudly. They didn't understand what Andaphon was doing. Then the bald man said, "Has he gone mad?" Then Mr. Glasses looked at him as if he were a sworn enemy, saying that trickery and pretending to be ghosts were his usual tricks. Maybe he had already noticed us. "Alright then, it's not okay. Now I'm going down to kill him," so he slowly went down to where Andaphon was, carrying a sharp spear intending to stab Andaphon in the back. But luck hadn't arrived yet when he saw Mr. Lee appear, a monster Mr. Lee from nowhere. Probably Mr. Lee jumped from the sky down to this island because Mr. Lee was afraid that his tiny enemy was about to be killed by someone else, so he showed up. The blonde-haired man with glasses was terrified when he saw it. He screamed and fell down. As for Antiphon, he said, Mr. Lee God. The monster, Mr. Lee, just stood still and watched them. Antiphon, he looked at Mr. Lee's appearance and didn't say anything else, except for the words Mr. Lee God. Then, he started crying. Tears fell down, and his body began to tremble. He quickly knelt down in front of Mr. Lee God and said, I know I was wrong. It was me who ruined this world. It was me who killed the people here. I am ready to dedicate all my time and life to you, Mr. Lee God. Please, please calm down and stop this punishment. Mr. Lee heard this but remained silent. The character modeled after Mr. Lee in real life was silently thinking. Even Robert and the butler Chow Men heard Antiphon's crying and pleading to Mr. Lee God. Mr. Lee must have been moved by now, having killed so many small lives. After all, they were also humans that he created, using hundreds of years of accelerated time. Then, Mr. Lee also said to the old butler, open the door, I want to go out. The old butler heard Mr. Lee say this, was a bit surprised, startled and taken aback by his words. Huh? What? Then, the old butler quickly took over Robert's chair and started to proceed. The artificial light source is ready after the rain, the sun is shining again, the sea level is starting to decrease. Sir, you made a very wise choice, Mr. Lee heard the old butler say. Mr. Lee closed his eyes and replied, just this once only, probably next time we'll repeat for volcanic eruptions or acid rain or diseases of all kinds. After Mr. Lee left the first miniature world, he was in his office reviewing the damage report of the first miniature world. This was part of the disaster mitigation and future damage reduction activities. The overall destruction of the Liland continent and the terrain in the miniature world was relatively high. Disasters like tsunamis and earthquakes caused a large number of casualties and devastated landscapes. The human population in the miniature world decreased from 1,400,000 to about 2,100 people. The tribes continued to reclaim land, and a new civilization began to restart. According to population trajectory forecasts, if we want the population to recover to a scale of more than 1 million people in the miniature world, it will probably take 200 years for the miniature world to develop. It will take more than 40 days or longer in real time. So, the rise of a civilization really only takes more than a month, and it will be restored as before. That's kind of funny. I wonder if their descendants will remember the fear of tsunamis and earthquakes that I caused this time, or if they will think it's a fairy tale. After all, people just have poor memory. In the first miniature world, there is a huge statue, not sure who it is supposed to represent. Could this be their imagined Mr. Lee God? Look at this, instead of being a modern development place with tall buildings, smoking, spraying smoke, partying all night long, every house has lights on, now it's like this. This must be the era of their descendants, and those who witnessed the tsunami and earthquake disasters have grown old or faded away. There are still many people coming and going and looking at the statue, then saying, I've always wondered if Mr. Lee God really looks like this and really exists. Hung doesn't know either. Anyway, the only painting in literature is drawn like this. It seems that it's time to follow the Attica era because no one has been able to verify whether it's true or not for a long time. Then there was someone else's voice behind them. Young man, don't mock Mr. Lee God. Are you sure you want to witness Mr. Lee God getting angry? The Mr. Lee God you are doubting really existing? Ah, who is this old man? Wrong place. He said he was a sinner because he was the first person in history to anger Mr. Lee God and bring disaster to the world. I heard that the life of our ancestors used to be very beautiful, prosperous, wealthy, peaceful, and happy. These things I also heard from my grandfather. Therefore, I said that happiness is heaven-sent, wealth and prosperity are from heaven, and the fate of the road is chosen by oneself. If heaven wants to destroy us, we cannot live until tomorrow. What is this? Why is he still surviving until now? Could it be that Mr. Lee God allows the wicked and criminals to live long like this? And good people die early? Or sometimes, perhaps living is worse than dying because of the gods. To let the bad people live longer, they want them to look back at themselves. The gods want them to turn back as the shore known as repentance. The person they are talking about is Old Man Antiphone. He came to the old place again, kneeling towards the sea. He had arranged a snowman made of stone, which was immediately recognized as the monster Mr. Lee. Now he is very old and has a lot of hair. His face is sad and lonely because Mr. Lee made him live long to enjoy life, but he was still not happy. He closed his eyes and was thinking about something. It turns out that he was thinking about the monster Mr. Lee with a dark body and those tusks. He remembered his childhood memories and breathed tiredly, remembered those tusks then turned into wings of gods, or a terrifying face with glowing red eyes. He thought of Mr. Lee's heart jumping up and down, sweating profusely. Then he woke up, opened his eyes and looked towards the deep sea that had sunk many lives. His body trembled, then he said, "Mr. Lee God Almighty, I have not forgotten what you look like, although it has been many years, your image is still there." Then he looked up at the sky and shouted,